What's up, YouTube? I'm making this video basically to address the OTLs. OTLs are those who believe in obeying the law, clear cut and dry, no questions asked. There's no gray area. It's just do as the officer says, shut the fuck up, don't say anything. That's it. Okay? I don't necessarily agree with that because as a person, as a citizen, regardless of what others may mislead you to not believe, you do have rights. Even when you're out and about, carry on your everyday activities in life, and if you do happen to engage with an officer, you do have that right to question why you're being pulled over, the circumstances in which they are addressing you, um, why they are giving you certain commands that you don't think are necessary, and you have to question the motive behind it. You have that right. Despite what people might lead you to believe that you don't have a right in, you do have that right as long as you're respectful. Now, if you're acting ignorant, if you're acting with such disrespect, if you're antagonizing an officer, if you're doing things of ill behavior where other people can come back and try to justify a cop reacting towards certain behaviors. Not to say that is necessarily right, but then that's a different discussion of who's held at a higher standard. And that seems to be where the conflict of interest lies. Okay? Um when dealing with law enforcement, I tell people know your rights, know as much of the law as you possibly can in your spare time, because if there's something that you're unaware of, that you don't realize that you have made an infraction, that you have broken some kind of law that you didn't know was a law to begin with, the first thing that an officer would tell you with a condescending response is ignorance of the law isn't an excuse. I've been told that on a couple of occasions. So as I duly noted. So now you don't force my hand to go look some things up so that I'm better equipped and better armed, with the knowledge of knowing what my rights are. When in future reference, if I have to come across another incident similar, I know where I stand. Um, I do believe that when there are interactions between a civilian and an officer, yes, as a civilian, I don't believe that it's necessary to just right off the bat give an officer a hard time. I don't believe in being disrespectful. Now, the pendulum swings both ways. If you're an officer, you know, if you want respect coming from an individual that you're pulling over or that you're stopping or that you're interrupting their day for whatever reason, your approach is how your response is going to coincide. Some people don't believe that cops handle people with such arrogance. That's a myth. Now, I say that because people like to bring up the argument, well, officers are human too. Well, if they are human, do you think that they're exempt from the human factor of behavior? That it just falls solely on the individual, the citizens in which they stop, and that we're held at a higher standard than law enforcement? Because if we are to conduct ourselves in a certain fashion, so should they. Am I right? I'm just asking. Because people like to respond to me when I'm looking at certain videos and I give my 2 cents or I give my opinions based on it. And when I say like the behavior of some law enforcement, notice I said some, not all, some law enforcement, where they feel entitled or they carry out this Nazi mentality. I didn't call them Nazis. I said carry out with this Nazi mentality. Let me see your papers. Let me, what are you doing? I mean, ask you all sorts of questions and this, that, and everything else. And, you have the right to either answer the question or not. Because sometimes it becomes a deal where either they're looking out for you or it's borderline harassment. They're just picking apart, trying to find something to justify why they had to stop you or interact with you on whatever incident or occasion that transpires. I comply with police. If they ask for my ID, I give it to them. If they ask certain questions, I answer them. But beyond that, if I feel like I want to engage in an all-out conversation that I don't deem to be necessary, I say, you know what? Okay, to end this right now, what's the purpose of the stop? Am I getting a ticket? This, that, and the other. Please write me the citation so I can please be on my way. Because I'm either going to be late for work, or I got a family emergency to attend to, or there could be a number of other factors as to why I need to get to where I need to get to. And this police interaction is preventing me to get to my destination. Some stops are justifiable, other stops aren't. Where the misconception is that people who rally behind the OTL mentality feel as though being a citizen, you don't have the right to exercise your rights. It's not unlawful to ask an officer a question, because they ask you plenty of questions, some unnecessary, some that are irrelevant to the purpose of why they are stopping you in the first place. It is not unlawful to know or exercise your rights. It isn't unlawful, if asked, for them to search you or search your vehicle, to refuse so. That's your right. You don't have to be obligated to allow an officer to search your vehicle. And granted, with some of the examples given, when you have officers guilty of planting things on people just to justify an arrest, I would be skeptical. I would be wary, depending on if the stop in the first place was questionable. And if there weren't examples to back up what I'm saying, then of course other people that are looking at this video will feel some kind of way and say that I'm just exaggerating the point. I don't. When I notice there's a difference when you see some interactions and you can just entertain YouTube, like I say, just journey down a rabbit hole, and you're looking at the comparisons. And there's certain channels that focus mainly on that. The shows like, okay, so when you see law enforcement pull over, here's an example, a white person, they get cussed out to high hell. They get told to F off this, that, and everything else. And then they call it like what? The walk of shame, when an officer says, okay, whatever, and they let the person go on their way. Then you have another example where there's a black interaction. And then the black person isn't so lucky. If they tried to act as what you see as the example of what the white person is acting towards an officer, it doesn't go so well. So there's a little bit of a bias there. Do I believe that you should comply with the officer? I don't think that you shouldn't. But given the circumstances, if you feel that your safety is in jeopardy, if you feel like you got to protect yourself, which means you're not going to allow yourself to be removed from a vehicle because now it turned from a simple traffic stop to, okay, this look like this is going to turn into a confrontation, by all means, do what you can to self-preserve yourself. I don't see how people, and I refuse to believe that people who believe that you should always comply with the officer, as if nothing, when you comply with the officer, doesn't end up in a disaster or a tragedy. Because there are examples, like I pointed out with the Ryan Whitaker case, uh, the recent one with Rakia Young. I mean, people can say, well, if you comply, nothing will happen. You wouldn't have to. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You can comply and still end up getting shot or getting your butt kicked by law enforcement. It depends on the officer that you're dealing with. And like somebody said before, you gotta play basically the roll of the dice. Am I going to get a good officer or am I going to get one of these bad officers? I don't know. I gotta be the one to have the luck of the draw. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, it's a decent person that I'm engaging in this interaction with, and hopefully, nothing, how should I say, escalates beyond what it needs to be. But unfortunately, in many cases, it doesn't always turn out that way. Now, I know I usually use the examples of white people getting away with certain things as far as them beating up officers, cussing officers out, exercising their rights, talk about how they don't need to show their ID, this, that, and everything else, and how they pretty much get away with it, or things don't end up in a tragedy. And then I look at black people and say, we aren't as fortunate if we acted with the same behaviors as our white counterparts. And people want to tell me that I'm full of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I would feel some kind of way, but I know what puts mine at ease is that I've seen examples with videos that I sit there and I look at in my spare time. I'm like, huh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, serious? Okay. Interesting. Hmm. So, so these things actually do have. Okay. Now I know what these people are talking about when they say how certain people get away with things that other people can't. Oh, this is what they were talking about. Okay, okay. Duly noted. Duly noted. Now, on the flip side, siding with the OTLs. Yes, there are ignorant people out there that put themselves in predicaments that they have themselves to blame. When you want to challenge a cop physically, you get what you deserve because you're initiating bodily harm to another individual. And by right, they have that right to defend themselves. However, when the role is reversed, you just got to play possum and hope you make it through the incident if you don't antagonize the officer and they feel like, oh, they're being disrespected. So, that bruised their ego. And somewhere it's an unwritten rule or an unwritten law that if you challenge an officer, you better know what you got coming to you because we don't tolerate that. And even though it's not against the law to challenge an officer, you will get your ass handed to you. That's not why you're an officer. If you can't have thicker skin to deal with the elements in which you're engaging with, then you need to find another line of work. Because I've seen interactions where cops talk down on people, put people to shame, belittle people, and we have no choice but to sit there and suck it up. So if we're capable of doing that, so is law enforcement. But in fairness, like I always say, it seems like people, citizens, are held at a higher standard than law enforcement. We are supposed to act accordingly while they can run amok. I talk about balancing the scales, and I can't emphasize that enough Because if you want people to sympathize with law enforcement, then you got to sympathize with where the people are coming from on their end. And it seems like people, it don't matter how many examples you put in front of them, how many analogies that are presented, um, whatever references that you have to justify your argument, they don't care. They will always never see law enforcement in the wrong, especially if you have where there are cases where the officers in court being sentenced, they will ride or die with the law enforcement till the end, still finding justification in their actions. Even if it's fellow officers who are condemning those actions, they don't care. These are ride or die OTLs. But what I want to know is, because I always believe that things come full circle, what happens when you have when you become part of the examples that you criticize, or if your kids become part of the examples that you criticize, and the shoe is on the other foot? Now you yourself, as an OTL, that are so condescending, that are so disrespectful, that are so arrogant, and always trying to put the person in the wrong and the officer on a pedestal. Now, I don't feel like I should be attacking officers or law enforcement, but I'm talking in reference specifically to the examples of those who are in the wrong. I mean, I can't tell you how to think. I can't tell you what approach and how you see things. I'm just talking on behalf of how I see things from right and wrong. I can see where in some interactions where the person's at fault and the cop is justified. Or I can also see where the person's in the right and the cop is in the wrong. But I'm not just going to be one-sided just because I have this conditioned mindset that, oh, well, I got, I got, let's see, right there. See, if that person didn't do that, the cop would have beat his ass. Oh, he sneezed. He sneezed. He sneezed. And that right there, that action of him having an allergy and sneezing is the reason why the cops shot him. He shouldn't have had allergies. He shouldn't have had allergies. He should have took his Allegra. And maybe he wouldn't have got shot today. Because cops, they got a hard job. They're under a lot of stress and duress. They don't know anything could pop off. Oh, man, he shouldn't have been a diabetic. He shouldn't have had a diabetic episode. He should have had took his insulin shots. And maybe he wouldn't have got tased to death. That was his fault. His fault. Oh, he was having a heart attack. Oh, and his foot hit the gas and he couldn't control himself and the cop shot in the way. That was his fault. He should have been eating healthy. And then he wouldn't have health issues and he wouldn't have had a heart attack. And the cops wouldn't have had to shoot in the vehicle. How was the cop supposed to know that he was having a heart attack, huh? That was the fault of the individual. Yeah. They should know better next time. Yeah. What? He went to the ATM at 11 p.m. at night? Oh, no. He should have went at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. That wouldn't have aroused any suspicion of the officer. Because at nighttime, there's always some criminal activity. I don't care how you look at it or what excuse you may give. There's no reason for you to be at the ATM at 11 p.m. at night. That was that person's fault. He should have went during the daytime. Oh. And that's the mentality of the OTLs. Until next time, until next video, peace.